Welcome to our deep dive. Today we're looking into something that, well, it touches a lot of lives. Narcissistic behavior. Our aim here is really to pull out the key insights from the material we've gathered to help you get a clearer understanding of this pretty complex trait.
It really is complex. And, narcissism is so often misunderstood. People might just think, oh, that person's just really confident.
Right.
But it's much more nuanced than that. It can be quite subtle, actually. And that's why getting a handle on what it really is, well, it's vital for anyone navigating relationships today.
That subtlety, I think, is exactly why it's so easy to misunderstand. It's
Yeah.
definitely more than just confidence. So maybe let's start right there. Let's unpack that foundational idea.
Okay. So at its core, narcissism, as our sources lay it out, it's a personality trait. It's marked by this inflated sense of self-importance
Inflated, yeah.
and a really deep, almost like an insatiable need for excessive attention, for admiration, and crucially, a lack of empathy for other people.
So we're not just talking about healthy self-esteem here or, feeling good about your achievements.
No, not at all.
This is more like an exaggerated self-focus, one that kind of warps reality and often ends up harming the people around the narcissist.
Yeah.
That difference feels really fundamental.
It is fundamental. And it's also important to remember it's not like an on-off switch. Narcissism actually exists on a spectrum.
Huh? Okay.
Yeah, it ranges from, maybe some mild traits you might barely notice day to day, all the way to a full-blown clinical condition. That's narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD, which is officially recognized in the DSM-5.
Okay, so it's a spectrum. That makes sense.
Hmm.
It also makes me wonder then, what are the sort of patterns we should be looking out for? If we're trying to identify a narcissistic person, maybe in our own lives,
Yeah.
what should we look for?
Well, a few key things stand out. You'll often see they're constantly seeking validation, needing praise. Yeah, pretty much. They genuinely seem to believe they are superior to others. And they can be quite skilled, actually, at manipulating situations to get what they want. A big red flag, really, is their limited empathy, if they show any genuine empathy at all. And they tend to react very strongly, often with anger or defensiveness if they're criticized, even mildly.
What's really tricky about that, though, is sometimes they can be incredibly charming at first,
Right,
right?
absolutely.
They can mask that true nature with this charisma. You might even feel, really drawn in initially by what seems like amazing confidence.
That initial charm is often, well, it's part of the strategy, you could say, but it doesn't usually last. Over time, that underlying need for control, for constant admiration, it starts to surface.
Right.
And that's when you begin to see the patterns, things like emotional abuse, maybe gaslighting.
Ah, gaslighting,
Yeah.
making you doubt yourself.
Exactly, making you doubt your own reality, your perceptions, and other forms of manipulation too, which can be, well, incredibly damaging.
Okay, so we've talked about who a narcissist might be, but let's get more specific. What does narcissistic behavior actually look like day to day? Can you sort of paint a picture for us?
Sure. So in practice, narcissistic behavior can look like dismissing other people's feelings out of hand.
Just brushing them off?
Yeah. Or taking credit for work someone else did. Very common. Blaming others for their own mistakes is another classic. They trip and somehow it's your fault the floor was there.
Wow.
They might stir up drama or tension, seemingly just to stay in control of a situation or relationship. And fundamentally, they tend to use other people as, well, as tools for their own personal gain.
And this feels like such a critical point from the material we looked at.
Hmm.
This behavior, it isn't always loud or, overtly aggressive.
No, not always.
Sometimes it's passive, it's subtle, it's covert.
Mm-hmm.
And that, you could argue, makes it even more dangerous because it's just so much harder to spot, at least initially.
Exactly. That subtlety can be very insidious.
So that initial charm, that mask, it gets even more complicated when we look at how narcissism plays out in our closest relationships. Let's make it start with romantic ones. There's often that initial phase described as the ideal partner phase.
Yes, the love bombing phase.
Yeah.
It's incredibly intense, very alluring. And what's really insightful about it, it's not just the sheer amount of affection. It's how it's almost strategically designed to bypass your critical thinking. It creates this overwhelming, almost addictive feeling of instant intimacy,
Addictive.
which makes it really hard for the person on the receiving end to spot red flags they might normally notice. They'll make these grand promises, say all the perfect things.
To reel you in.
Exactly, to reel you in, making you feel like, wow, I finally found my soulmate.
It's amazing then how that can shift.
Yeah.
When they start to devalue their partner, What are maybe some of the first signs, maybe subtle signs someone might pick up on before it really escalates into that full-blown control?
Well, you might first notice just a subtle change. Maybe the constant attention or compliments start to dry up a bit.
Okay.
Then it can morph into more controlling behaviors. They might start trying to dictate how their partner thinks or how they dress or who they see. Withdrawing affection is a common tactic used as punishment.
Wow. As
Punishment.
Yes. And using guilt, gaslighting that comes up again, and emotional blackmail. Really, the core truth that emerges is that the relationship starts to revolve entirely around serving the narcissist's needs. It stops being about mutual love or respect.
So moving from that to marriage specifically, the picture painted there is, well, it's pretty stark. It highlights just how emotionally draining and, frankly, unstable that kind of union can be.
Absolutely. In a marriage context, you might see the narcissistic partner making all the big decisions unilaterally without real discussion,
No discussion.
or subtly undermining their spouse, maybe belittling them, sometimes in private, sometimes even in public. They consistently dodge accountability for any problems. It's always someone else's fault. And here's a really striking thing, how incredibly charming they can often be to outsiders, like the perfect spouse in public,
Right.
while being cruel or manipulative behind closed doors.
And one of the really painful outcomes mentioned is the isolation, isn't it? The idea that the narcissistic spouse might actively try to turn other people, friends, family, against their partner,
Yes, that's devastating.
leaving them feeling totally alone, and maybe even worse, making them feel like they are the problem.
That's exactly the goal, often. The result for the non-narcissistic spouse is frequently this profound sense of feeling invisible, completely confused, or just broken. It's this gradual, insidious wearing down of their self-worth.
It really sounds like it. Okay, let's shift gears slightly and talk about friendships. The insights there suggest these connections can feel very one-sided.
They often do feel that way, yes.
Yeah.
A narcissistic friend typically dominates conversations, talking mostly about themselves,
All about them.
pretty much. They might disregard your needs or your struggles or seem uninterested. They often disappear when you're not immediately useful to them for something. And jealousy is common, too, getting jealous of your successes. They might even try to turn friends against each other, again, as a way to stay in control of the social dynamic.
And the impact that has on the friend. It's often feeling like you're not enough, right?
Yeah.
Or this weird sense that you somehow owe them something just for the privilege of being their friend,
Yeah.
which is just an unfair emotional load.
It is completely unfair because real, true friendships thrive on reciprocity, a balanced give and take.
Right. Needs to go both ways.
Exactly. But with a narcissist, it's almost always all give and take, with them doing pretty much all the taking.
So as we kind of start to wrap up this deep dive, the main challenge seems really clear. Narcissistic behavior, it isn't always obvious right away.
Yeah.
It can be hidden behind that charm or humor or even what looks like genuine success.
And once you're actually caught in that cycle, in that dynamic, it just becomes so much harder to get out without emotional scars. The longer it goes on, the deeper those effects can be.
Which really underscores why recognizing narcissism for what it is so crucial. It's the essential first step. And the material really suggests that, setting firm boundaries or even making the difficult decision to walk away entirely might actually be necessary for your own mental health, for your well-being.
Ultimately, the core message here for you listening is something really fundamental. It's that you deserve respect, you deserve empathy, you deserve authentic connection in all your relationships.
Absolutely. So as you reflect on these insights we've discussed, maybe take a moment to think about what true reciprocity really looks like, what it feels like in your own connections, and perhaps consider how you can actively seek out and nurture those authentic connections that you truly deserve.